Hello everyone and welcome back to the Great Book of Grudges. My name is Nathan and today I want to have a little bit of a discussion on my personal hopes for Warhammer the Old World. Ever since it's been announced, I've been thinking left, right and centre of what can happen and what GW have planned, to be honest. And speculation is always fun, so I kind of wanted to sit down and talk to you about what I personally hope is included in Warhammer the Old World, what's removed and so on, and see if you guys think in a similar way to me. Obviously, it's very likely that we will have similar thoughts, and in other cases we will also conflict, but it should be really cool to start a discussion. So without further ado, let's begin. While we are quite a while away from the release of Warhammer the Old World, and we don't know how far Games Workshop actually are into this development, it's still cool to do some speculation. Now there's a lot of things that people have been commenting on in various forums and so on, because, well yeah, Warhammer Fantasy changed a lot throughout editions. If you look at 6th edition and compare it to 8th edition, for example, they are quite drastically different. So yeah, there's a lot of changes that could happen. I myself quite prefer 8th edition, maybe because it's the one that I've played the most, because after the end times I carried on playing, but I do see the value and the interest of 6th. So firstly, let's talk about rules. Honestly, yeah, I like 8th edition, but it does have flaws. Steadfast kind of breaks the game a lot of people would come up with hordes and so on. They need to streamline the rules a little bit and cut down the book size. For example, the Big Red Book is what, 500 pages? It doesn't need all that fluff. It's got a lot of fluff which makes the book bigger. They need to just remove that and maybe just supplement the loss of fluff with scenario rules and so on. That being said, the rules themselves could be a bit more clearer and not so spread out. It comes to a lot of cases where there might be rules in say page 30 and it'll say, oh, also look at page 107, and it does happen a lot, especially in the 8th edition rulebook. While I am saying that they should streamline it a bit, I don't want them to streamline it to the point of Age of Sigmar and Warhammer 40k. Don't get me wrong, those two systems are very good, and I'm sure a lot of people enjoy it. I myself play 40k very occasionally now, because I'm building armies and making content and so on. But whilst I also want the rules streamlined for Warhammer Fantasy to make it easier for new players, it should more or less keep the same ideas as it used to. The perfect example of this is when looking at a 40k army book, or codex as they're normally called, where it says like a Space Marine has a 3+ to hit. No, that's making it too easy because I want to see, for example, weapon skill versus weapon skill and then finding a total from that. So for example, a weapon skill 3 versus weapon skill 4, you'd require a 4 to hit. Or if you had weapon skill 6 versus weapon skill 3, you would require a 3 to hit. Streamlining is good, but I want to keep the identity of the game there. Naturally, things like this actually go to the powers that be, and they're the ones who decide, but I want to hope that they're thinking it in the same way. If we look at it in the Horus Heresy, it's still pretty much like 7th edition 40k, so it is a bit harder than 8th edition 40k, and that means that obviously the spirit of the game is there for that section. You're going to notice me saying spirit of the game a lot because, yeah, I do want it to be a bit easier for people to come into, but I also want to keep the old aspect of Warhammer Fantasy battles into this. It's probably me being a bit of a purist here, but I kind of just want to see it as it's supposed to be, maybe because it'll probably be easier for me to understand it than if they streamlined it to Age of Sigmar or 40k standards. Maybe I'm just being a little selfish there. But stubbornness aside, I'm still very hopeful despite not knowing what may or may not happen. Let's move on to the setting, shall we? The Warhammer Fantasy universe has had a very expansive storyline, which has gone through many decades and centuries and so on. And you know, there was really cool events regarding Sigmar, uniting the tribes, obviously the humans and the dwarves finding their alliance, the War of the Beard and so on. I honestly believe that the timeline should be focused around the time that Karl Franz became Emperor, mainly because a lot of the PC games coming out, or console games and so on, are based around that timeline, and it really does help actually bring in players into the tabletop. The perfect example being the monumental success of Total War Warhammer, which is based around the time that Karl Franz became Emperor. A lot of people who play that game would like to pretty much live that storyline in the tabletop, so I was thinking if the timeline was based around that, and slowly released and carried on through extra books and so on, that'd be kinda cool. And there's nothing stopping GW actually releasing campaign books for timelines prior to that, for example the Vampire Wars and so on. I'm not saying for Games Workshop to rewrite history, but maybe to add more to history, which would be really cool. We could see a lot more fleshed out lore from ages past, with maybe some lore expansion towards the rule of Magnus the Pious, maybe even stuff from early Bretonia, the Crusades down into Araby and so on. It would give them reason to create new models, new campaign packs, and keep players invested for longer. But while we're on the topic of models, there's two things I want to go through. First off, naturally, it's obvious that every player wants their old models back, bringing back the whole range and so on, and we don't know how far we'll actually get of the range, but it'd be really cool if not only we got models from the 8th edition army book, but some older ones too. I'm talking about the War Wagon for the Empire, and some other cool models. It would be really cool. Obviously, if I had things my way, a lot of models from various editions would be compiled into each respective army book. That is, of course, if we are getting army books, but we'll get to that in just a little bit. All I'm hoping is that the models that we see in the army books, if there is an army book, isn't the last of the new stuff or old stuff that we'll ever see. The Horus Heresy is still getting a bunch of new models, so it would be really cool if we actually got new ones ourselves, and hey, if it worked out, maybe they could make them compatible with Age of Sigmar. Nothing too extravagant or big, but something that could work for both games if people so wished for them to be in both games. It's just so easy to magnetize models nowadays. But that's obviously something up to the design team and the powers that be. But since we've spoken about the army books, I kinda hope that we get something similar in the vein of the index books that we got for Warhammer 40k. Because, yeah, one of those books can cover about maybe 3-4 races, no fluff, maybe just a little bit of fluff and that's it. But everything is just basic rules and just to get people going. The army book creep was very slow in 8th edition, and as we know, some armies didn't even get an 8th edition book, or some of them didn't even get a 7th edition book. So I'm hoping that we can just get these going out in one go, and then eventually see proper army books come out. And yes, I'm saying army books. I want to see actual books. Softcover, hardcover, whatever, just not digital. It'd be really cool to actually have the book in hand. I know that a lot of people are preferring digital nowadays, but it's my personal thing about having a book with you, so when you go down, sit down for a bit for a drink or something, you've got it there and you can check it out without needing a phone or an iPad or something. Maybe it's just me being an old dude despite being in my 20s. I'm expecting that we'll see army books or indexes or whatever for all the armies that were out for 8th edition, so Beastmen, Warriors of Chaos and so on, but I'm really hoping that if this really does kick off really well for GW, that they might actually consider making army books and new models and rosters and just armies in general, especially for those of races, powers and so on already established in the Warhammer Fantasy world, which never really got to see much barring some supplements. I'm of course talking about Araby, Cathay, Ind, Kislev, they're very popular races in lore. Loads of people love them, but they really didn't get a lot barring those supplements. It would be really cool to see those, maybe an official army book for something like the Vampire Coast. We know that's a popular DLC for Total War Warhammer, so it would be really cool to actually see that on the tabletop. With official models, please. I am so bad at kit bashing, it's unreal. There's really not much else to say. I just want the purity of the game to stay true to Warhammer Fantasy battles, but still accessible to new players to get into without too much of a learning curve, which would be absolutely awesome because the more players the better. I think it'd be really cool if we got back our 8th edition armies with a lot of new models. Some casts upgraded would be nice too. I mean, I'm not saying that they're not bad, but the Globadiers I think are like 30 years old. Might be time for a little bit of an upgrade, maybe? And a system of index books would be incredible to keep people playing without having to wait for army books too long. At the end of the day, obviously, we don't know what's actually going to happen. We still have to wait a few years until we actually see the release of Warhammer The Old World, but these are just some personal hopes of mine. What are yours? Let me know in the comments below and let's start a discussion. The way to make sure that our voices are heard by GW is if we start discussions, whether it be on YouTube videos, comments on a Facebook forum, or just general forums, Twitter, Instagram. These things do help. So let's just make sure our voices are heard and we get to see a glorious return of the old. But with that, my friends, we've come to the end of our video. Thank you so much for watching. If you did enjoy the video, might I suggest giving the video a like or even subscribing to the channel, as it really does help us out. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I shall see you all again very soon. Have a good day.